Hi, I'm Lance Secretan. I'm an author and an advisor to leaders and pretty well everybody on the planet, one way or another, that wants to hear. I've written a new book called Reawakening the Human Spirit, and we're going to talk about motivation, talk about leadership, and how both of those are finished and dead and fairly useless, and how we now should focus more on inspiration. We're going to talk about having a purpose in our lives and what that does for us, and we're going to make sure that in the end, the journey we complete leads to a life that's more inspiring than the one we have right now.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of Leadership Excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Let's talk about the end of leadership as we know it. Leaders have been carrying the weight for themselves, for their families, and for their teams over the last few years, and it has been exhausting. Yet as leaders, it's an important part of what we do that we inspire those we serve. With the looming economic threats, with a war in Europe, polarized politics at home, and much more, how do we regain our own inspiration? How do we inspire others? How can we reorientate our lives, our perspectives, and our well-being? Is there a path that will reawaken your human spirit? Well, that's the vast and intriguing road we're going down for the next 2 episodes, so stay tuned. As always, we need your help in staying relevant, so please get over to wherever it is that you tune into podcasts from, and please do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. It makes a huge difference, and hey, maybe will give you a shout out live on air. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's dive in. Our guest for the next 2 episodes is my dear friend and mentor to me and many other leaders around the world, Lance Secretan, PhD. He is a spiritual thought leader, one of the world's top authorities on creating inspiring lives and organizations. His best-selling books, presentations, life-changing retreats have touched the hearts and the minds of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. He is a riveting speaker, trailblazing teacher, speaker, mentor, advisor, coach. In fact, he's ranked as number 4 in the world. I have no idea who the other 3 are, but they can't be that good because he is amazing. He is the author of, wait for it, 23 books. Obviously, the guy sits around doing nothing much about inspiration, corporate culture, and leadership. He's a former CEO of a Fortune 500 company, university professor, award-winning columnist. He's an author who has received numerous teaching, writing, and humanitarian awards, including the International Caring Award. He is chairman of the Pay It Forward Foundation, and his most recent book is Reawakening the Human Spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome returning champion, spiritual Sherpa, my dear friend, Lance Secretan.
Thank you, Dov. That's a very, very elaborate introduction. I haven't had one like that for a long time. Thank you.
You deserve it, mate. You deserve it. So, as you know, everything for me is about meaning. And I think that oftentimes we get caught up in all the, quote, shit that's going on, all the stuff that's the hustle and the bustle and the latest. For you, what is the origin story of what gives your life meaning? Because you've had a very colorful life.
Yeah. I was born in England, And I was born, and I'm giving away my secrets now, I was born before the Second World War. So I lived through the Second World War in a war zone, right? So the house next to me was bombed. We had an air raid shelter at the bottom of our garden. It was my dad. I never saw him, and so on. So, that sort of thing was what I was raised on. I was terrified.
Sure.
For the first 5 years of my life, bombs falling and blasts and blackouts and everyone knows what. It's kind of like Ukraine. So it shaped me in the sense that I was firmly opposed to violence from then on. And that's been a theme all the way through my life. Now, the other big turning point, I think, is that when I was about 19 or so, I got to work for a man that I now call the boss from hell. And he was truly a tyrant and just an awful, awful person to work for. But I learned a lot. And then at 27, some strange person said to me, would you like to be CEO of Manpower, which is a giant global Fortune 100 company? And there I was, 27 years old, knew nothing about running a company. And the only thing I could think of, Dov, was, well, what did my boss from hell do? I'll do the opposite.
Really?
That has been my code ever since. It's amazing to me. I look at people that are not functioning properly or organizations that are broken. I ask questions like, what is happening here? Usually it's X, let's say. And I say, well, that's not working. How about doing the opposite? Do you think that would work? Bingo.
Right.
So there we are.
So when you think about that boss from hell, and you went into that role of CEO of, it was Manpower. I remember Manpower when I was a kid, right? It was, it was huge. Like when I was in my teens, it was where anybody who wanted a job went to Manpower. It was where you put your resumes. Yeah. So for those of you who are much younger, it's kind of like monster.com or one of those sites, except there were physical places in every main street of cities around the world. I mean, it was huge. So when you stepped into that role, which is a massive role, having that experience of having the boss from hell, most people would go, yeah, it was a shitty boss, but that must be what you have to do in order to be the boss. And that for me is interesting, Lance, that you said, I'm going to do the opposite when this guy is obviously successful. He's already a boss, whatever that means. And so it's a natural equation in the brain to go, well, that must be what you have to do. I'm really fascinated by why you went the other way.
Well, I think the thing is about this, that it's about how you feel in that environment. It's not about the success of the boss.
I agree.
It's about how do all the employees feel. And they felt terrible.
Right.
And not only that, but we had we've kept in touch, some of us over the years, and from that company. And we said, we should hold a convention in the Air Canada Centre, like 60,000 people, of all the people who left, and got burned out. I mean, the staff turnover was horrendous, staff turnover. So, when I'm now in looking after Manpower, I'm saying, how will this impact people? I don't want it to impact people the way it impacted me. And for me, everything is about that, not about the company. It's about how does it impact people? Because if you do that right, everything else falls into place.
Yeah. And you and I have had many discussions about that. We're going to come back to that. But let's start here. From your point of view, as I said, you've been in leadership for longer than most people. You're so highly regarded around the world in all these different environments. Let's do a sort of honest state of the union regarding leadership in the world today. What's your sort of state of the union on that?
Broken.
Broken. Leadership is broken.
Totally broken. Broken everywhere.
So from your point of view, how did we get so broken? Is it the neoliberal form of capitalism that's not really capitalism, in my mind, not my truth, not really capitalism? Or is it something else? The rise of fascism is going on everywhere. So how did we get there?
Well, we got there by dehumanizing business.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is we might say these days, let's have a meeting with the marketing department. We don't say, let's have a meeting with Dove, Lance, Mary, and Susie.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's a transaction. It's arm's length. Or give you another example. I can walk down the end of my driveway and go up to a complete stranger and give them a hug and tell them I love them. No problem. They might look at me kind of funny, but no problem.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that at work.
Mm.
What happened? What happened? I can't actually tell people that I'm fond of them or I enjoy their company or they inspire me because I'll get into trouble with human resources. This is ridiculous. What have we created here? These are human beings just in a different place. There's no rule that says I want to be loved from 5 p.m. at night till 9 a.m. in the morning, and then at 9 a.m. in the morning, I don't need to be loved anymore. That's ridiculous. We're humans 24/7. So what have we done? We've dehumanized business.
So you bring up a very good point. I know you and I have talked about this before. It's really important that in this politically correct and potential for legal issues, HR, which used to be about people, has become the buffer zone between legal and the workforce.
Right.
And here's all the things you can't do. HR
Right.
says, and HR are in a stranglehold from legal. And you and I can pontificate about why we need to be more inspiring and about why we need to be more loving and more inspirational and more caring and speak about these things, but still companies are going, yeah, but how do we confront that, Lance? How do we confront this massive fear around the potential of it becoming a legal disaster that you said to somebody, you look lovely today. And oh my God, that's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Or even if you touch them.
Oh my God. Even on the shoulder, or like, how you doing?
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, I know. You've got to be very, very careful. I once touched an African-American woman's hair and I got in all kinds of trouble. I didn't know that you're not supposed to do that. These are the kinds of things that, hey, I think she's got beautiful hair. Why can't I say that? I mean,
Exactly.
I don't have any, look, I love people.
I really appreciate your hair more than you could possibly imagine.
Right. So, this is what's gone wrong. Now, let's be clear here. I wrote a book about this. So the answer to your question is a book called The Bellwether Effect, because what I wanted to find out was what's not working in organizations. Why are people pissed off? And they are. And, the Great Resignation is a good example of that. But why? Because we're doing things in organizations which are foolish and we should stop them. And actually, we should do something almost exactly the opposite. And where did we get those ideas? We got them from the military. Most of the things we understand about the structure of business is a military idea. Think about mission statements. Mission is a battle term. What's the mission? Mission impossible. Mission is not a business term. It is now, but it didn't ever used to be. Performance appraisals. Performance appraisals are the most reviled, horrible thing that ever happens in business. Where did this come from? From the Air Force. During the war, we wanted to figure out how to recruit pilots, and we didn't know how to do that because they're all dying. They're only 22 years old, and they fly off in a plane and they get shot down. Now what? You need a new pilot. Well, how do we find out who's going to be a good pilot? That's a very tricky profession. Performance appraisal. Oh, so let's do that in business. But we're not running a military system here.
Right.
And so what we have forgotten is we've bifurcated everything. We've got the home life, social life, that's one thing, and work life, that's a different thing. And the two don't meet. That's silly. And what we're seeing, just one more point about this, Dov, that's interesting. I've researched work, and I discovered that work as a word in the English language didn't exist before the 1600s. Like, we didn't even have a word for it.
Really?
There was nowhere to go. You didn't go to work anywhere. There wasn't anywhere to go.
Of course, because you had the farm, you were doing
if you're a blacksmith, it was in the back of your
garden.
house. Yeah, it was in the back of your house if you're a blacksmith. So, you didn't go anywhere to work. Then we started to build things like factories, and cotton mills and lumber mills and so on. And pretty soon people went to work to those places. And even in far distances, they go traveling to mines and things like that. Well, that's all new. And now look what happened during COVID. All of a sudden, we go backwards. 500 years. We're now working from home again. This is how human beings are wired. That's why people are so happy going back home to work, because that's what they always have. That's in their DNA. That's who we are. Going to another place, to a different way of being and living, that's not natural for us. So this new world we're facing now is going to be very interesting, because we're going to be like we were in the 1600s.
So let's go to that for a minute. So, you mentioned the Great Resignation. And of course, one of the things I talk about is that I think that COVID was the great pause. It was this moment where we all got to jump off the treadmill that we were running so damn fast on, and took a pause and went, why the hell am I doing this? And we began to question the meaning of our lives and why we were doing things. And then comes this great resignation, and followed by this potential threat of a recession. And so in the Great Resignation, the power is with the workforce. Screw you, I'm not coming back. And all the companies are scrambling and throwing money at people. And then the potential of recession comes along, and now the bosses feel like they have power again, because, well, you've got to come back and work in the office now, and we're going to fire you if we paid you too much, and we're going to only pay. And so it's always this bloody pendulum that's not relational; it's power based. Do you see it that way, or do you see something? Am I missing something?
Well, I think there's a Spanish term for all of this. It's called caca de toro. And, that's, I think, the way you can describe this, because the reason leaders want people to come back to the office is that they have a really big rent bill and a very fancy building, and it needs to be filled. Otherwise, they're just wasting money. And so they're saying, we need you back in here to justify our overhead, which is the wrong solution to the problem. The right solution.
It's the wrong problem.
Well, truly.
Right? We're coming up with solutions for symptoms.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah.
So what we actually need to do is say, Dov, you need to do X in your work. Let me help create a way in which you feel comfortable doing that. What would that look like? How many days do you want to spend here, if any? What technology do you need to make that work for you? How can I support you? How can I make your life whole? In other words, that's what we should be doing.
So you go out in the world, and the part of the challenge, and I'm going to push back on you a little bit here, Lance, because I've said this all the time, and you know this because you also mentor leaders. And a lot of the time is the pushback is, yes, that's very nice, but, and here's the but, we still have to run a business. We still have to be profitable. We can't hold everybody's hand. And I'm like, well, I agree. You can't hold everybody's hand, but you also have to be treating people like humans as opposed to cogs in a machine. Their response to that is, if we don't make profit, we're not in business. If we're not in business, we can't take care of people. So it's profit first because we care about our people. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it doesn't make any sense. To get those people back, you're going to have to pay them more, which eats into your profits. Why would you do that? That's stupid. So, it's illogical. They're just not thinking straight. And that's just baloney, caca de toro. It's just not true. Right. So, they're making stuff up to justify the real reason, which is they've got an overhead to fill. Now, the difficult opposite way of saying that would be, let's craft this in a way that works. Yes, of course, we're in a capitalist system where we have to make money. Everybody gets that. But the way we make money is by making sure that people are inspired and performing at high levels and generating the kind of customers and results that we're looking for, so that we make money. That's how it goes. You don't start the other end.
Right. So let's go there for a minute, because, like I said, this is your 23rd book, I think you said, right?
24th, actually. Yeah.
24th book. Okay. So this is the 24th book of 23 you've previously written.
Mm-hmm.
Reawakening the Human Spirit. Tell us why you decided to name a book that title, particularly aimed at leaders. Does that get pushed back too?
Yeah, it isn't, because that's the difference with this book. This book is not aimed at leaders. This book is aimed at human beings.
Who happen to be leaders?
Yes, some of them.
Okay.
Yeah, some of them.
Right.
But that's the point. Everything that I've done for the last 50 years, and Dov, I have to say, without paying attention to modesty here, I've worked with some great companies: Microsoft, Starbucks, Humana, Kaiser Permanente. These are all clients of mine. They're fabulous, fabulous clients. They've done very well, not just because of me, obviously. They're brilliant, brilliant companies, but I've helped. Mm-hmm. And I've coached some of those leaders who now are multimillionaires and retired.
Mm-hmm.
Nice job, eh?
Not bad.
I can say, yeah, right. Now, what about the rest of the employees?
Mm-hmm.
There, I didn't do so well. So there, I wanted to say, well, why is that? And here's the big thing of the time. You referred to this earlier on. Here we are suffering with a million pains. Ukraine, climate change, losing our job, inflation. The list goes on. Mm-hmm. And the world's feeling heavy for people. So the question now becomes, I can't change Putin. It's not going to go away. It is what it is. And I can't personally do anything about that. I can do my little piece, same as I can with climate change and other things. Yeah. But I can't fix the problem. And that's frustrating because there are 20 of them that I have to deal with. Mm-hmm. So how do I get to be inspired in a world that's clunky like that? Mm-hmm. And this book says, here's a plan. We have to get out of this. We have to keep our tails up in a time when things are really tricky outside. And that's the world we swim in, right? That's where we have to live. So let's be positive about it. That's what the book is about. It's a recipe for figuring that out.
So as we were sort of moving towards the end of the first part of the show here, walk us through a little bit of that, a little bit about how to reawaken that human spirit within us, which may be feeling suppressed, oppressed, or just maybe in a coma.
Yeah.
Under the pressure of everything.
Yeah. Well, there are 3 steps. The book is subtitled Finding the Spark, the Flame, and the Torch Within.
Yeah.
And what that looks like is that the book is divided into 4 chunks, really. First chunk is, we call that the foundation. There are some foundational ideas that we need to really understand if we want to unpack the rest of the book. For example, stress is a myth. Stress is a choice. Stress doesn't exist. We keep complaining about stress. But if I get cut off when I enter the freeway in my car, I have a choice. I can rant and rave and yell and scream and give the guy the flip the finger, and I can make sure he knows what a jerk I think he is. And then my blood pressure goes up, and now I say, wow, that was stressful. Mm-hmm. Or I can say, I am really grateful for the life I live, mm-hmm. and just keep driving. I'm not going to change anything by ranting, mm-hmm. except my blood pressure, and I'm going to take some years off my life. I don't need to do that. So stress is just one of the many things I talk about in the foundation. We need to change that. Now, the book itself walks us through a sequential series of exercises and things to do. For instance, why are we here? What's the point of our lives? How can you lead or manage or be a parent or a friend or a child or anybody if you don't even know why you're on the planet? What are you going to do? Die without that information? It's time to get that. When you have it, all great leaders that we've been inspired by in history all knew why they were here. That's something that we can learn. So that's one of the steps. There's many steps in the book, but that's one.
And I want to sort of come back into that particular one as we come back into the second part, because, Simon Sinek wrote the book, Start With Why. Great book, good understanding, helps a lot of people. But when I meet these people, it's like, have you read the book? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, you still don't know your why.
Right.
And they go, no, I did. I went through Simon's process. And I go, Simon's process is great. But what I've come to realize, and I want to talk about that in the second part, is that, and I know that you and I are on the same page with this, is that the reason most leaders don't know their why is because they don't know themselves. They've gone through an academic process that's not academic. It's an emotional evolution. It's an excavation of finding out what sets your soul on fire. And that's not academic at all. And I think that oftentimes leaders are afraid of going to that place. So I want to talk about, in Awakening the Human Spirit, how afraid leaders sometimes are of awakening that, because there's a fear they'll also awaken the shadow self within themselves. So yes. I want to go to that in part 2 of the show. Before we end part 1 of the show, I want to make sure that everybody knows how to find out more about you, about all of your insane amount of resources, the books, etc. So please tell everybody they can find out more about you, Lance.
Secretan.com, Secretan.com, or Reawakeningthehumanspirit.com, or Google, LinkedIn, all those places. Yeah.
And of course, we will make sure that we post all the links to all the socials and all the rest of it. And as I said, there's a lot of books on Amazon. So we'll make sure all those are posted along with all the other links in the show notes. We're going to be back in just one click for part 2 of our delicious conversation with Dr. Lance Secretan as we reawaken the human spirit. Stay curious, and we'll see you on the next show.